처음에는 소주 성주께 책이 참가자의 꼴을 제자 인생 공동 야외 호수고 하에 안도 순주다서 안도 남사라 하창과 동성이 나오네 대사청과 대 그는 순주다성을 일단 순주다성을 화해 야생 아젠다 렌지야다 공조를 봐 안기다 공조 컬을 자고 대상시장 세나 농지 자정 고도 옛날 게라 아빠 생각 요만해.
Dharma Chapter continues in the next verse, explaining that even such great gods as Brahma, Indra, like are subject to this process of impermanence. He says, if even Brahma, Indra, the Chakravartins, and the kings of India, Tibet, Mongolia, and so on, if even these are subject, that even these are subject to impermanence, which describes the various gods of the form realm as they are imagined to dwell above the Mount Meru. There is the king of all gods, so to speak, Brahma, and there's Indra residing in his palace among the 17 realms of the gods of the form realm. And there are also various types of universal monarchs, Chakravartins as they are called. All of them very powerful beings. These Chakravartins come along in 4 categories, depending on what merits they have achieved, what they have accumulated. There is, for instance, the Chakravartin king who rules over 4 continents, and the one under him rules over 3 continents, one who rules over 2 continents, and one who rules over a single continent. All of these beings who have accumulated great merit and great a lot of positive deeds in order to be born in such a situation in the first place. But even all of these, even though they are so all-powerful, are also subject to impermanence in the end. What holds true for all of these superior beings, gods and universal monarchs, Chakravartins as they're called, of course also holds true for human kings. Think of the kings of the past of such great countries as India, China, Tibet, Mongolia, etc., and so forth. Even though great kings appeared there, and even Dharma kings, also they eventually perished. For instance, there was the famous Dharma king Ashoka in India, who on the basis of the teachings of the Buddha managed to organize his kingdom even in worldly ways. He is famous to the present day, but he has passed away millennia ago. Or think of the 3 great Dharma kings that appeared in Tibet, the emanation or manifestation of the great compassionate one, Avalokiteshvara, who was none other than the Dharma king Sotsingampo. After him, the manifestation of the Bodhisattva that personifies the wisdom of all Buddhas, Manjushri, who was the Dharma king Trisamdetsa. Or then afterwards, the manifestation of the Bodhisattva who stands for the power of all Buddhas, Vajrapani, who manifested as the king Sherab. All of these were extremely well-known, extremely famous, extremely influential, and they are still well-known nowadays, yet they all had to die. Now, when taking into consideration that all of these superior beings gods, universal monarchs, or human kings have to die. These beings who obviously have accumulated so much merit in order to find themselves in their positions as gods and kings in the first place. These beings who held immeasurable influence and power over others, if even these are subject to die, then of course, as Kamachaka continues to say, it goes without saying that those ordinary beings of us who are endowed with comparatively little merit, of course have to die as well. Kamachaka continues in the next verse to say there are 400 kinds of illnesses, 8,000 kinds of obstructors, and innumerable causes of harm to life duration and life force. So already at this time, hundreds of sicknesses and diseases were known, hundreds of causes of possible death, of causes that could at least severely shorten a lifespan were well known. On top of these diseases, which are here numbered as 400, there were also lots and lots of other causes that could possibly shorten the lifespan of ours, such as all sorts of hindrances, obstacle makers, demons, spirits, whatever you wish to call it. We're speaking of 8,000 here. All of these bring harm to our lifespan, bring harm to our life force, and serve to shorten that life of ours. So these are to be taken into consideration. And Kamachaka continues to say, when will this life, which is like a butter lamp in the wind, cease? This lifetime is likened in this analogy to a butter lamp or a candle, for that matter, which stands unprotected. The slightest gust of wind will distinguish the light. That being the case, our life being so easily distinguished by all sorts of causes and conditions, this is definitely something that ought to be contemplated. And he continues in this vein, saying, for example, like a prisoner being led to the place of execution, years, months, days, and hours pass by and become closer to death. That's exactly the same case with us. As the time passes on, as life goes on, as it drains from us, so to speak, we come closer to death invariably with every breath that we take. However, it is by no means sure when exactly death will actually occur. Therefore, Kamachaka asks, when will we meet the Lord of Death, who is called Yama? That is in no way sure whatsoever. It cannot be determined at all. And therefore, again, to contemplate time passing, life becoming shorter with every breath that we take, is indeed a worthwhile endeavor. The text continues to ask when medicaments, protection, and rituals, etc., fail for the patient, when will then the time be upon him? Or when will this time be upon us? As we're sick, or as we're getting closer to death, we might employ all sorts of means, such as treatment, medicaments, whatever sorts of therapy there might be, or protection devices. These all will fail eventually. Whatever rituals we might have asked others to do for our long life, eventually, of course, they will fail, because die we must. The question just remains, when will that time be upon us? Only in our text where it says, once the rays of the sun are about to set behind the western mountains, there's no way to prevent or to avert the setting of the sun. So this analogy is being used here of the sun that eventually sets in the west, or its light that disappears in the west behind the western mountains, is the picture that Kamachakma uses here. When that time has come, there's no way whatsoever to prevent the sun from setting. There's no way to postpone its setting. Set it will, and that's that. Nothing to be done about it whatsoever. And the same holds true for us. Once the end of our life has been reached, there's no way to postpone death. There's no way to lengthen life in any which way whatsoever. Death will be upon us, and that's final. However many relatives or servants we may have gathered around the self, they will be powerless, because leave we must alone. However, when will that be the case? Again, continues Kamachakma, which simply means to say that however many people we might have gathered around ourselves, be they family, be they friends, acquaintances, servants, whoever or whatever, when the time of death is upon us, we go alone. Not one of them will be able to join us. Probably not all of them would be willing to join us. And we will just have to go alone. That's simply that. However much wealth we might have accumulated, however affluent we might be, when the time is upon us, we will be powerless to take even a single day's vision with us. However, that moment of leaving empty-handed, when will that be upon us? That is the question that remains. So whatever it is that we might have accumulated in the way of wealth, influence, etc., and so forth, this will be of no avail whatsoever when the time of death is upon us. Empty-handed we will leave. The one thing that remains to be found out is when that will happen. Kamachakma continues to say, we will wander alone and lost in an unfamiliar land. When will that time come when we do not know where we have to go? This is the moment of death, and the state, the intermediate state after death says, is being likened to the journey that we have to undertake into completely unfamiliar lands, unfamiliar countries. Not only are we being tossed out into this unfamiliar place with no map or with no guide, but there is also not anyone around whom we could possibly ask for directions or for help. Again, that will indeed be the case, that will sooner or later come to pass. We're just unclear about the when it will happen.
NASA society what happened? Then around the NASA society more and is it Matopa Tenga Yona Yam? Then around the NASA around the ledge on around NASA. There are the NASA the Medina or gold logical. That's the one. Do we tell about the nominal? I don't mind getting the Narana Padon, Tendra Kaduri song.
Although the agony of illness is fierce, says Kawachakma, there will be no way to share it. Once upon a time, the day will come for all of us when we will find ourselves under the influence of all sorts of diseases, sicknesses. We will undergo all sorts of painful experiences. And much as we would like to wish to give this sickness away to someone somewhere else, for that matter, there's no way to do so. Whatever sickness, whatever pain we will eventually experience has only been caused by ourselves through our own previous negative deeds. There's no mistake about it. Whatever, for that matter, it is that you suffer through, you yourself have caused it. No one else has done that for you. Therefore, you cannot give it away to anybody else. You have to sit through it, you have to suffer through it, all by yourself, all alone. When in this way, as Kamachakma says, every misery in the world descends upon you alone, when will that time be? Well, that is the thing that we do not do, that we do not know. It will happen one day, eventually, that's for sure. And when we will find ourselves in such miserable circumstances, no one can say. The appearance, increase, and luminosity of the stages of dissolving will not be recognized. When will the time come when whatever we do, we will be helpless? This is how Kamachakma continues the verse. This refers to the actual sequence of the events while we're actually about to die. That death is truly upon us. These experiences, which are not experiences, increase in luminosity, which are also, with other terms, are called the experience of whiteness, redness, blackness, or darkness, for that matter. They describe the sequence of events that one goes through as one finds oneself in the actual process of dying, after which then the luminosity, clear light, natural state will arise. However, if one has never familiarized oneself with these points, one has no idea, for that matter, what it is that one is actually undergoing there, one will find oneself rather helpless in that situation. And it just remains to be asked, when will that moment occur that we are helpless in this way, not knowing what it is that's actually happening to us?
David says some issue also cut. Maybe more for us. I'm around some and Padula Jackson covers and Robert Jango and Jackson covers. And then make it on the way on the much Dharma as a shooting more. I can dig in I feel as if you're finding about from
the sounds, lights, and rays, these three, as manifestations of the peaceful and lustful deities will appear. They will fill us with terror, and they appear in frightening manner. So once we find ourselves after death in the intermediate state, then these appearances will indeed occur. They are the manifestations of both the peaceful as well as the wrathful deities. There will be very loud sounds like claps of thunder. There will be unbearably bright lights, and the rays of these lights seem to pierce our body. It is altogether a frightening experience. It strikes terror into our hearts. The question reminds me, when on earth will that happen to us? But nevertheless, this is the experience we will go through once we find ourselves in the intermediate state, once we behold the manifestation of the peaceful and wrathful deities in this particular way. Like a criminal hunted down by an army of pursuers, when will that moment of terror be upon us? The next two lines in this verse. The analogy here is that of a criminal who has committed a great crime and who is now pursued by many people who are out to catch him, to do all sorts of unspeakable things to him. He will never know when exactly these people, his pursuers, will descend upon him. We will find ourselves pretty much in the same situation at this particular point, having passed away, finding ourselves in the intermediate state. We do not know what is going to happen to us at any given moment. And this strikes great fear into our hearts. Terrified and anguished, we will be led away by the messengers of the Lord of Death. Our innate gods and demons will describe our good and bad actions. We will find ourselves in a position where it seems as if we're being led away to the judge to be judged about whatever it is that we might have done. And we're greatly anguished about what might come different. We're greatly afraid of all of our deeds being brought out in the open in front of that judge who is none other but the Lord of Death, and we are greatly terrified of his verdict. It is as if all the spirits, gods, or demons, whatever you wish to call them, that have accompanied you throughout your life, who know intimately what it is that you have done, good and bad, will just spill it all out. And you are powerless to do anything about it. You're just awaiting the verdict from the Lord of Death, who is the judge here in this picture, and you are powerless to do anything about it. So again, this is a situation which also strikes great terror, great fear into our hearts, yet we are utterly powerless to do anything about it. And this verse continues to say, lying will be of no help. Our record will appear clearly in the mirror. When will this time come when we regret that which we have done? So as we find ourselves thus judged by the Lord of Death, who is depicted as holding a mirror, seeing even the slightest misdeed that we might have performed, when that time is upon us, then finding all sorts of excuses for our deeds, even lying about them, will be of no avail whatsoever. Whatever it is that we have done will come to fruition, and verdict will in this way be passed upon us. The question is, the question that remains, as with all the other points, is when will this come to happen? Though we desire good merits, positive merits, these will nowhere to be found, to be bought or borrowed. The king of death, the master of death, will clearly distinguish between good and evil. Practice now, so that you will not have to regret then. If you don't, you lack sense and you're just fooling yourself, deceiving yourself. These are the words of Karma Chagma, which again pertain to the very same situation. If you find yourself in front of the Lord of Death and you're clearly being judged by him, in that situation in which even the tiniest of misdeeds will become apparent, there's no way whatsoever to cover them up in any which way, then indeed there's a lot of regrets, there's a lot of lament, and you will wish from the bottom of your heart to be able to even just borrow a little bit of positive merits, a little bit of good karma. However, there's nowhere around where to get such good karma from. There's no one around from whom to borrow or to buy such good karma. Your deeds are apparent and you will be judged accordingly, and make no mistake about it. Therefore, Kamchama says quite clearly, it is now that you have the opportunity to do something about it. If you do not use your time now to practice, to put all of these teachings and instructions into practice, well, then when the moment of death is there, when you find yourself in the presence of the Lord of Death, well, then there's no point in regretting, there's no point in crying, whining, because that is too late. At this particular moment, there's nothing to be done about it whatsoever. Whatever it is that you have done, you will be judged accordingly. If, however, you should continue to fool yourself along these lines, well, then so be it. Nothing much can be about it if you should be so stupid. And that is exactly what Karma Chagma says here. You would have to be regarded as a fool who simply deceives himself, or herself for that matter. And she continues to explain, it is very much like someone who is employed to do a certain job, who lacks all interest, who lacks all motivation whatsoever to do this job. A person like this is more a pain than a help in the eyes of the employer. And it is very likely that whatever it is that you are told to do, being so completely listless, being so completely uninterested, and being so completely unwilling to do whatever you're told to do, that for the most part, it is already quite clear that you will very likely cause rather more harm than benefit. So do not be like that. use your time that you have at your disposal now, then you will not have to regret when the moment of judgment is upon you. Rinpoche, from his many years of experience, give us an example of such experience. They're exactly the kind of people who come to see Rinpoche and ask him, oh, what should I do? When then asked back, like, what do you mean? They say, well, what should I do? Oh, right, what should you do? Well, then the advice could possibly be, why not begin with the preliminary practices? And they usually reply, oh, yes, thank you very much. That is such a good piece of advice. And off they go. But then, in the rest of the, during the rest of the year, until one meets again here and other such places, it happens that, for instance, in the mornings when they would have all of the time in the world to actually begin with their practice, do frustrations or whatever it might be for that matter, they just can't really get around to actually get out of bed. They rather turn around again, they like to sleep in, and morning turns into noon, and when eventually they wake up, they do so completely refreshed, looking at another day of doing nothing. And so time goes by and they don't get anything done, and then eventually next year she sees these people again and asks them, well, how has it been going? Have you been starting with your preliminary practices? How many have you accumulated, etc. and so forth? And they say, oh, it's such a drag. The entire year there was just no time. I managed a few frustrations, but I didn't get any further than that. And most likelihood they continue then to ask, what should I do? By all means, there are different varieties of such useless foods. One that every now and then turns up is the type that says of him or herself, for that matter, I've been practicing the Dharma for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. I'm an old hand at Dharma. I'm really old-time Dharma practitioner, hooray. However, any signs of accomplishment in my practice have not occurred. Rinpoche would then ask them, okay, what is it that you've been doing all that time? They say, well, for instance, I practice Chenrezig sometimes. Or other people might answer that their practice is Tara or Vajrayogini. And they say, well, yes, I do some practice, I do repeat some mantras of these Ilam deities sometimes. But so far, no sign of accomplishment has occurred. Something is wrong with that Ilam. Rinpoche, please, give me another one.
아니 지금 문자 용질이 상대봐요라. 이 레바데 대시 첨보요. 아니 니마다도 숙침보요. 나면서 내가 되는데 대시 세함으로와. 되나? 아니도 사바지 좀 상도와. 근데 이 레바치가 진짜로. 나랑도 되는 제기요 말이. 야당수 야당태라. 제기요. 용인지 大众车嘛种那样，对，大众车嘛没那样，对，有到这个落地呢，人家娘们去呢，这娘们去就上全部来。
Indeed, there are such people. Now, what's the problem with these people? The problem for the most part is that when they start out with whatever practice they choose for themselves or whatever practice they are given by the teacher, from the very start they have lots and lots of expectations and great hope that even in the shortest duration of time, months or even weeks just, signs of accomplishment will clearly, unmistakably occur, experience of heat, clarity, non-thought, whatever may occur. Their expectations, their hope are indeed great, but they cannot in any which way be compared to what actual effort they undertake. Compared to their huge expectations which they have, they actually make such little effort that it's hardly worth mentioning at all. Under such circumstances, of course, how on earth can you expect there to occur signs of accomplishment, signs of insight, clarity, non-thought, heat, or whatever it is that you might be after? There's no way that could happen. She says, of course, that is not the case with any of us here. We all practice one-pointedly, now don't we? We all are completely free of hope and fear concerning any such occurrences, any such signs of accomplishment, now aren't we? We have no regard for these matters whatsoever, but we just one-pointedly concentrate upon our practice, isn't it? Now this is exactly the way in which we should train. Ideally free of any expectation, free of any hope, free of any fear concerning any possible or impossible signs of accomplishment for that matter. Simply do the practice as you have been advised, as you have been instructed, to the very best of your ability, one-pointedly train yourself in that practice. If you do so, and ideally without any expectations, without any fears as to whether or not signs of accomplishment might occur, then you can be sure that eventually, if you go about your practice in the right way, that these signs gradually will make their appearance. There is no doubt about it. You cannot go wrong in that way. Once these signs actually do begin to appear, also there's no reason whatsoever to be greatly exuberant about this, to be happy to celebrate yourself as a great practitioner. After all, if you make a fire, there will be smoke. No one would celebrate the appearance of smoke, would they? There would be plain stupid. So in this way, simply continue with your practice as instructed, free of any expectations, free of any hopes, free of any fears of there nothing occurring, free of any expectations of there being great signs of accomplishment. And you can be assured that the blessing and inspiration, etc., will eventually be experienced by you. It's just exactly as in that story that we know of a Sangha who for 12 years locked himself away in recurring periods in a cave on a mountain in India, practicing upon his chosen deity Maitreya, and who just fell from despair to despair because Maitreya would simply not appear to him. When Maitreya finally appeared to him, he asked him what on earth happened. For 12 years I practiced so intensively, it never occurred to me once, and the answer that he received was, well, he was so obscured by all your emotional defilements, he couldn't even give rise to compassion. As you have done so now, here I am, and know that I have been there from the very beginning. So if nothing happens in your practice, if no signs of accomplishment occur, it's not the mistake of practice. It is your own emotional defilements which are that thick that you're just unable to perceive any signs, to perceive anything that could possibly serve as a sign of accomplishment or as a sign of success in the practice. Keep that in mind. Let us now at this point dedicate whatever merit we might have accumulated here for the second week.